Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Abraham. This week we're going to reflect on chapter 46 of the book of Psalms by King David. We start with verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. This is one of the dozens of times that King David calls God our refuge. We know that. Now, this is not a matter, we have to say this again, this is not a matter of repetition for repetition. If King David is repeating it, it's for a reason. If our prophets repeats again and again and again the same thing, no idolatry, no negative wickedness, no negative thought, no negative this, and it's again and again and again, we have to pay attention to that. You say, yeah, but it's like the same thing all the time, that they're telling us to be good, but we're not able to be good. But the idea is to get it. And we learn by repetition, by the way. Remember arithmetic, like adding, 1 plus 1, 1 plus 2, 1 plus... We have to memorize. It's repetition. That's the way human consciousness is. So the more we repeat, the more we learn something. Now, of course, that those who are more fortunate that they learn in one time, they learn everything. They don't know to do it again and again and again and again, or read it again and again and again. They read it once and they get it. We're talking about the average people here, like us. We need to be reminded all the time, God is our refuge, an ever-present help in trouble. Now, this is a deep thing. We're talking about an all-present, always present help in trouble. We use the analogy of the air because it's the best, the most appropriate. The air is there all the time. So God created the air to sustain us constantly until we die. That's one of the meaning of the always present help in trouble. Now, you may say, in what way the air is helping us? To be alive. That's the help we get from the sun, from the moon, from the air, food, and above all, love, because all comes from God's love. So ultimately, when we breathe God's love, literally. Let's be aware of this. So that we must stop for a moment, close our eyes, take a deep breath. This breath is God's love sustaining me. It has to contain God's love, because it keeps me alive. So we breathe, and then we become aware of that. This thoughtfulness that Buddhists teach, like thoughtful mindfulness. Just let's be aware that every breath we take, we have been nurtured and sustained by God's love. So this is one of the meaning of this. Now, the difference is like your constant help in trouble. It's like the air helps me when I'm in trouble. Yeah. This is no matter what, how bad the situation is, the air is there for us. No matter what. It's like, what in trouble? There's air. What not in trouble? There's air. It's God. This is the perfect analogy. It is. Now, in the same way that if we understand that air is good to us, then we have to be as good as this air that keeps us alive. It's like a mutual reciprocation, we reciprocate. It's like I'm receiving the life of God through this air, among other things, the sun, the moon, food. But they have to be as good as they are to me. It's fair. Think about it. It's fair. I'm receiving all this goodness. Why am I having these negative thoughts and making all this negative speech and deeds? There's something wrong here. It's like I'm taking goodness for granted. Yes, the air for granted, the water for granted, the food for granted, the sun for granted, life for granted, love for granted. Then we have to be, this is the ethical approach that God wants to teach us in the Torah and in this book of Psalms and the Hebrew Bible. Goodness is the ethical principle of creation. So like goodness contains an ethical quality. We see that when we receive goodness, it's like it's the right thing to do. That's as we define ethics, doing what is right, correct. So then this is what we have to understand when we say it's always present. It's no matter what. Even if we die, God is with us. We are His creation. And He controls and directs and sustains and loves His creation. Now it's up to us, obviously, to reciprocate this goodness by being as good as the air, as good as the sun. It's a challenge. Verse 2. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. 3. Though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. 4. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. It's like no matter what, everything is shaking. The earth is changing. God's love remains. Now we have to understand this in a deeper level. What do you mean by though the earth give way and the mountains fall in the heart of the sea? We're talking about the temporariness of life. God transcends time and space. So this is an interesting way, a poetic way in which the psalm is presented. Even if there's something temporary in life, God is always there. So to make us aware of our temporariness. And at the same time, this awareness invites us to connect with the endless, infinite, untemporary quality of God. So that we transcend with Him by bonding with Him. We also transcend time and space. There is a river. It's like no matter what of the temporality, there's something that is constant. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. What is the city of God? Jerusalem. What is the meaning of the city of God? The awareness of our permanent connection with Him. That's what God dwells, God's city. So we become aware of this place where God dwells through our connection with Him. It's the only way to find out, by the way. So how do we know God? We have to connect with God. How do we connect with God? We have to study His ways and attributes, which are all related to goodness. But the more we understand goodness and the ethics of goodness, then we know God. We dwell in His city. That's the city of God, by the way. Goodness. That's what Jerusalem represents. But again, the practical meaning of this city is like it has to be in our consciousness. We have to dwell in this city, in the highest realm of consciousness. That's Jerusalem. And then we understand. And then we know. 5. God is within her, the city. She will not fall. God will help her at the sunrise, the break of day. So, let's go back to verse 4 when it says, there is a river. River is a stream. And again, it represents a quality. It's like the sense of constant movement. That river is always moving. And it makes glad the city of God. So what is this stream in our consciousness that makes us happy of our connection with God? This permanent awareness that we were mentioning before. That's the river. That we have to keep this awareness present all the time in order to keep rejoicing and being aware of the joy of being with God. Six, nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. God, He lifts His voice. The earth melts. So this verse 6 is acknowledging God's control over His creation. It's important because we believe all this is that the nations are going to be eternal and the negative thinking is going to be eternal and the negative traits and trends in consciousness are eternal. No. Those are temporary, those fall. Also, God makes them melt. And again, in this case, it's some kind of transformation. Smelting is like when we see ice melting into water. But it doesn't destroy it. It's transformed from something solid to something liquid. So, 7. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Talking about a specific God, the God of Israel. With us. Talking about the air a while ago. That is with us. He sustains us. It's not just the air, it's everything. Life. 8. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations He has brought on the earth. Let's be aware how nature works. It's God's creation. 9. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. Wars, what kind of wars is the psalm talking about? It's like this conflict, this turmoil, this chaos. that we see in creation, the things that we don't understand, this climate change, these hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, that we also have into our own within our own consciousness, by the way. They cease by God's will. So this one day, David is telling us, David, this particular Psalm 46, it's a little nothing, all the uproar, all the changes that we see in the material world will end by God's will. Meaning there's going to be a transformation, there's going to be a melting in which the result of this will be permanent, eternal. So this is a clear allusion of the Messianic age, era. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Again, the references of bow and spear, arrows, shields are related to war. They are work instruments. So we're talking about war, we're talking about conflict. It's a negative connotation. We know that. Who wants war? Nobody wants war. But again, there is war. We have to be aware of that. We have to wage a war against wickedness and evil. We have to. And we better begin with our own evil and wickedness, our own negative traits and trends in consciousness. We have to start with there. There's a war. And again, he burns them with fire. It's like these negative things at some point God will eliminate from our consciousness. He will. It's here. So this is about the Messianic times. And it's about the present time in terms like, if we connect with God, none of these instruments of war, conflict, are going to be in our consciousness. Because we're living in goodness. Therefore, we don't allow any conflicting things represented by arrows, spears, and bows. They don't want to be there. With fire. We have made reference to fire many times in our blogs, here in the videos. We begin with the chemical definition of fire. So you go to the dictionary, that's what you're gonna get. It's like fire is a catalyst. It's an element that transforms matter from one state into the other. That's it. So that's the main meaning. So if we apply that meaning to here, the Jewish Bible, we will understand it in the context of transformation, because it's a transforming element. The ability to transform at the right temperature, intensity. So we check that. We see that every day when we cook. Put too much fire or too much time in the fire, we get the burn. We're not going to be able to eat it. And we also learn that the best stew, the best soup, some of the best meals are the result of a slow and long fire. Of course, not all of them, because if it's too long, then it would taste different, would lose the taste. That's what I'm saying. Some of them. We know how things transform from one state to the other. And then we see that in the process we gain flavor and we lose flavor. So we have to add. Oh, I have to put more salt. I have to put this spice. And again, let's go back to what we say in the context of this particular reflection that we have on the verse, God is using his fire. Now, what is God's fire? Is it the same fire? They probably have the same quality in terms of transforming. As he says, it will transform all the negative things into positive. We have to understand the fire of God as God's love. So he has some kind of heat that transforms us. It's warm. Okay. Then he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. I am, actually. This is present, but again, we said in the previous chapter that most of the translations are in the future, future, future. Because the idea is not to say that it's not now, it's the idea that it's eternal. So the translations are related in the future to mention that it will last forever. But it's something that is happening in the present. The original translation in the present or past. So he says, be still and know that I'm God. What is knowing that God exists? We have to make this permanent awareness that we were talking about of what God represents in our consciousness. And then we say it's goodness, and then goodness is our common bond with him. The image and likeness that we have in common with God. Then I am exalted among the nations, meaning the nations, that we represent the nations, negative or potentially negative traits and trends in consciousness. We referred in previous chapters, represented by the 7 negative qualities in consciousness, represented by the 7 nations in Canaan and before the Israelites came to conquer them. Those are the nations. So we have to conquer the nation, meaning they have to serve God, they have to serve goodness. That's what we understand, that it will be exalted, praised among the nations, by the nations. I'm exalted in the earth. The earth is full of his glory. So we will recognize, all aspects of consciousness will recognize that goodness is what prevails and is destined to prevail in every facet and aspect of life. Verse 11 and last verse of this chapter 46, a short chapter. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. This is a perfect, it's not ending, it's like completion of the message of this chapter 46. We're not talking about a regular God here, we're talking about the God of Israel, which is with us. Okay. So, as it is the air, God is with us as it is the air we breathe. So, okay, with this we finish our reflections on this short chapter 46 of the book of Psalms. Wishing you, as usual, an abundantly blessed week. Shabbat Shalom, and until next time.